allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay. Action on the minutes. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Do you know voice was all right now? Phyllis, Larry, and Taryn? Okay. Any discussions?
No, sir.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. The manifest is going around. Do we have any resignations, sir?
No,
Do we have any nominations,
No.
sir? Do you have a report, sir?
I do briefly.
I like that.
This won't be, he says he likes that. This won't be my normal to go to old text, but this one's 1933. So I have a short passage to read for you tonight as we move into the budget process a little more, and this was really fun.
This is the Sanborn 1933?
Yes, well, sort of, because at this time we were part of Epping School District. But it was great because Phyllis was looking for some things and she found this 1933 to 44 book. It's pretty cool. So I was amazed when I read this to go back even another 30 years at the content. So here it is, it's very brief. Today your community, as well as every other community, is studying its schools and every other agency of government to discover what economies can be made to bring expenditures within the community's capacity to pay. Sound familiar? Care should be exercised to avoid economies which are short-sighted. The quality of instruction your child receives will depend largely upon what you pay for it. Wise buyers know that there really is no such thing as a bargain. Parents owe it to the children to weigh carefully the many proposed methods of economizing in school expenditures. A false step here can cripple the fundamental services of the schools. In the years just ahead of us lie important problems. These problems cannot be solved by a blighted generation. With past successes alive in the present, we are led to believe that the future is not barren and dark. Many improvements in personnel, buildings, and equipment have taken place. I can barely read this without laughing because it's almost exactly what we've talked about this year. More satisfactory and better trained teachers have been employed and retained. Lights have been added to every building. Much painting and redecorating has been done. Added toilet facilities have been installed. Playground apparatus has been built. Better teaching equipment is being added from time to time, so we might ask, what is the next step? For improvement of educational opportunity and general value, consolidation is both logical and practical in your district. I was thinking of consolidating with Fremont around purchases and things like that we're still discussing at this time. Another imperative improvement is the installation of improved toilet facilities at the Patton School. The present equipment is unsanitary, antiquated, and belongs to a bygone era. I hope you will see that this improvement is made. I'm deeply appreciative of the support of the school board, the assistance of a good force of teachers, and the cooperation of parents and friends. This year has passed with a maximum of effort and a minimum of difficulties. The everlasting teamwork of every bloomin' soul has been our watchword. Thought that was kind of fun. So
New motto for the SAU office.
yeah, we should paint that right on the wall above the two new doors there, Jim. I think that my update is that, it's been a number of weeks since we met. I think it was December 20th, but it's only been 2 school days. So there isn't a whole lot for us to report tonight to you, except that we continue to watch the weather. So I hope you all stay safe the next couple of days. It's going to be pretty challenging. Thank you.
Okay, that it? Committee reports, policy.
The policy committee met today, and we expect to see the review of our policy manual from the New Hampshire School Board Association on January 24th, so we'll have a lot of work to do after that. We discussed a memorialization policy, and we have have a rough draft ready, so we'll have a first read on policy regarding memorials for deceased students. We hope the entire community will review the first draft of this policy. We'd love to get some input on the policy we're developing. We also discussed advanced placement courses, dual enrollment policy, and we have a revised policy for first reading at the next meeting as well. And we will be discussing a Narcan policy at our next meeting, which is on February 7th. We hope to meet before the 7th of February, but if we do, we'll post it on the website.
Excellence in secondary education.
Our next meeting is January 17th at 5 p.m.
Facilities.
Okay. Facility Subcommittee did engage this evening at 4:30 p.m. Myself, Larry, as well, Mr. Baker, Steve Riley, and Michelle were there. There were 3 items on the agenda. First item was the seminary building. For those of you who may or may not know, the seminary building has recently had pipes frozen on January 1st, New Year's Day. Mr. Riley was called to action, as well Ms. Croto and others. As of right now, the building is without heat, and the only room that actually does have heat is the boiler room. So there's a electric Modine heater that is in place, that has been approved by Fire and Safety to maintain the heat and fire suppression of that boiler room. This is the second time that the pipes have frozen in the seminary building in the last year and a half. There is no warranted action by the board or the facility subcommittee. We want to thank those who came to the rescue of the building to further any damages that were done. Any questions about the seminary building by the board? Okay. There will be, just one quick comment, some cost savings as well, because of obviously we're no longer heating the unused space for what's worth, and providing any electricity there for that. The other item, continuing with the word heat, is boiler repairs. Here at the high school, there's 2 of the 3 boilers that have been placed since the building opened up nearly 11 years ago. 2 of the 3 boilers have had challenges over the years. Boiler number 1 and boiler number 3. Boiler number 1 currently has water leaks and cracks in it of the 12 different chambers. Is looking to get serviced, and as well, boiler number 3 though is currently out of service. Steve went ahead and did the right thing and took it out of service because there was combustion leaks which were emitting some flames out of the side of it, and so that boiler is completely down right now. So this building is being operated by 2 of 3 boilers, for what it's worth. This all came to our attention because of Steve doing his regular inspection, number 1. Steve had done his work and looked for 3 competitive proposals to go ahead and try and get this stuff repaired. We only received 2 of the proposals for what it's worth, because the others we're in mid-season and everyone's busy. So we only got 2 of the 3, which makes complete sense. So there is some warranted action this evening by the board. The facility subcommittee would like to ask the board for approval to authorize expenditures not to exceed $29,000 without informing the school board of any change orders to take place. And that is to go ahead and shut down boilers 1 and 3, which one of them already are, to disassemble the boiler sections, repair, maintain, reinstall, reassemble the burner assemblies.
You're asking for a motion on that?
I'd like to ask for a motion to allow the subcommittee, yes. I already so moved.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on this?
I just have a question. What's the life expectancy of those boilers if they're only 11 years old?
It's a great question. Quite frankly, a lot of us would think that 30 years old or so, at least 30.
20, I would
20
think,
to
before
30.
a boiler. 11, I would think is too soon.
Steve has been experiencing and is expected that these have had jacket problems for years, and these have had actual section problems for numerous years. So
Are they
someone may
out of
have- why-
warranty? What was
They
the
are out of
warranty on
warranty.
those?
They're out of warranty. They're out of warranty. Yep.
What is the warranty on a, do you know, on one of those?
About 10 years.
10? So we were experiencing problems
Yeah.
We didn't start experiencing problems till after 10 years was up?
I can't speak to that.
Yeah.
I know that we have experienced problems this year, and we're taking steps to remedy that.
I agree. We all agree. We ask the same questions, well, because we're concerned that ultimately what's going to happen once they start getting into these devices or boilers, how many more things can't they see that are going to require fixing? I mean, these are six-figure devices alone, each. Now, quite frankly, someone made a comment about prior architects, prior, equipment that was brought into the building. I asked the question, well, why are we not having these same problems over at Memorial? Why are they not having the same problems over at Bakey? Different devices, different equipment.
Further discussion? All in favor?
I'd
Oh,
just like
sorry.
to say that the proposals that Steve got were to determine the causes of the leaks. They were specific to replace certain parts that they knew about. It may be less expensive than that if it turns out to be gaskets and that sort of thing. That's the top price. On a couple of these, some of the things that they're going to be replacing have been replaced before. So it's unlikely that those specific parts, although we don't know for sure, would need, and their jackets would need to be replaced. But it's a lot less expensive to do upkeep and maintenance on these than it is to replace the boilers that are only 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah. Something that we should think about, though, is ultimately we're obviously in some real challenging weather here, historical weather, obviously. Seminary buildings already lost, we're already down one. What would the cost be if two go, and because we don't maintain it?
Right.
So it's preventative maintenance at the same exact time.
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor? That is unanimous.
All right, we had one other subject matter here, and this is something that was being bantered about prior, and that's the high school and Swayze gym floors. As we all may or may not know, we had some budgeted line items for this, and those are some of the things that were discussed prior. The high school floor, there's two ways to look at high school floors, the gyms, the two gyms. We can either do a full reconditioning or we can just do priming, right? Obviously repolying. To do the full reconditioning here in the high school for the large gym, it's $26,750. To do full reconditioning for just a small gym is $7,500. Again, these have not been done since the building was open. Furthermore, the Swayze gym, just to do polishing of both of those floors combined is $4,775. So again, $26,750 for the large, $7,500 for the small.
Excuse me, Corey, if I could
Yes,
just
ma'am?
interrupt for just a second. The Swayze gym is actually $1,800.
I haven't got there, have I? No, I haven't said the 18, I haven't said the Swayze gym
Oh, I thought you
yet.
said the Swayze gym, sorry.
And then furthermore, the Swayze gym is $1,800 for just polishing.
Right.
That's what we looked into,
Polyurethane.
polyurethane.
Yeah.
Correct. So ultimately, the facility subcommittee would like to make a recommendation to the board to approve full reconditioning of both the high school floors, which will total 36, and also polyurethane, the Swayze gym, for $36,050 to come out of the facilities use revolving account. The motion.
Second.
I'll-
Get the motion, Larry seconded it. Further discussion, oh, yep.
How much will that leave in the revolving account?
Good question. We are hitting it hard this year.
We are. So the account, as we were looking at it earlier, had $297,862 in it. The gym floor cost items were one of several items that were up for consideration. When you add all of them together, it was $187,050, which would leave $110,812 in the fund if all items were considered. And the, in addition to the gym floors, were the NESDEC study at $30,000, the tech switches at $30,000, and the Bakey Energy EDC at $91,000. So those items, the other three items aren't part of the current motion, but
Correct.
those were the things that would be considered.
One comment is, the facility subcommittee talked a lot about, well, why do we support this? And more importantly, well, let's remind ourselves what's happening here. Those floors are used every day. Especially the Swayze gym, used not only by our students here, but the middle school students and also the public. Ultimately, there's a cosmetic issue, but there's also preventative maintenance and future maintenance. Again, this will be the first time that both the large gym and small gym in 11 years have been done in this building. For recon. And yes, it's a true statement that every year we should be doing full polyurethane over floors. I'd asked the question if this would save any money on staffing over the summer and cleaning it. It would not. If any, it would have a nominal savings. But
On the revolving fund, I'm just curious, do you have a kind of a sense of, on an annual basis, what comes into that fund sort of annually?
I do not at this point in time. I know that we have that information, but I don't have the dollar amount.
Okay, thank you.
Does that go through a warrant?
I'll make that as something to bring to the next facility subcommittee.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Yep.
That's good.
Move the motion, please.
Okay. All in favor? Unanimous?
Our next meeting is February 7th, 2017, or 2018 at 4:30.
Finance?
We have not met.
Okay. Public relations?
We have not met. Our next public relations meeting is on January 22nd at 1 PM in the SAU office.
Personnel?
We have not met, however, we do need to change the date of the next meeting. We had set the next personnel meeting for what is actually Martin Luther King Day, so obviously that's not going to work. So Jim and Pete, we need to figure out another date for it. I propose that we do it at 5:15 for the next board meeting on the 17th, if that works for you guys. Does that work
Yep.
for you, Jim?
I have to check my book. I don't know. But I'll let you know.
Okay.
Would it be okay if Mr. Tamel attends instead of me, because I'll be in another meeting?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or I may have Mr. Tamel go to ISA, and I'll come to personnel.
Yeah. We don't want to miss you.
So that's January 7th.
January 17th at 5:15, so it'll be 45 minutes before this meeting.
Besides, you buy the pizza.
I buy the pizza, yes, thank you.
I know you had said you're gone the end of the month, so
Yeah.
I was trying to avoid that.
I have priorities.
Yeah. SST?
We have not met.
Seminary discussions. I think we just had a pretty good recap on that.
Yep, have not met.
The next
People should be
meeting is
done.
January 31st at 8:30.
Thank you, Pam.
We hope to have the second appraisal in hand.
Yes, the hope is that that will be done by the end of January.
Right.
Budget.
The Budget Committee has not met. They do have a meeting tomorrow night, snow date of Monday, January
We're
8th.
going to change that. I'll be talking about it at the end, but they'll be meeting Monday, not tomorrow. The chairman just got me before, but it's always good to mention it twice.
Okay.
So I'll talk about that at the end.
I
Monday
had
the
a
8th.
feeling that was Monday.
And that would be, what time? What time? 7. Okay. I'll mention it again at the close, but doesn't hurt. Okay. Public comment.
Hi, Mary Sear. I'm from Kingston. Is this working?
Yep.
And I have an observation. Before you enter into non-public session this evening, I ask school board members to think long and hard about the condescending, finger-wagging, and derogatory admonishments we've been subjected to meeting after meeting by one of your peers. People, whether present in the gallery or elected officials who may or may not be present at school board meetings, have been repeatedly warned without cause against the potential for nonspecific ethics violations, with the implication that some elected officials may be involved in underhanded activities. I, for one, have heard enough. It's a divisive and accusatory dialogue. It is neither productive nor welcome. It certainly does nothing to strengthen the fabric of this community. In the case of the very real ethics violation you faced in early June, and any new legitimate concern which may come before you this evening, nobody here that I'm aware of was circulating petitions, attempting to publicly humiliate others, or contacting the news outlets to bring undue attention to the district or its affairs. Simply, the board is entrusted to act swiftly and decisively on such matters. Going forward, I respectfully request that you do the same with any real and credible case of evidence concern, rather than waste time and energy fretting about fabricated allegations and unfounded fears. Thank you.
We don't usually address public comments, but there's something, because this is the second time now this week that this board has been, that there's been discussions about things as far as our inability to do certain things. And I've got to be very vague because it needs to be vague. We've all seen situations where someone's accused of a crime and the police have to say it's under investigation, where the defense can say what they want. We have many, many situations that the public is aware of, but that we must discuss in non-public session, and therefore cannot report back out what we do. So it looks like we may be covering up, as one person said, or we're not taking action, as another person said. But I guess in typical American situation that started in 1776, we don't trust our leaderships. I was taken back when I was at the last meeting that this came up with. We are in when I say an awful position, being school board members, that a lot of times we can't defend ourselves because it is non-public, and we're asking the public to, in a sense, trust us. And like I say, we haven't trusted government since 1776, you know. But I want people to be aware that we do take these things seriously and we do act on them, but we are legally bound not to discuss many things that we discuss, and even some actions that we take that we cannot tell people about. So I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I understand exactly why the people grab me, whether it be in Demoulas or, you know, someplace, and like I say, what was it? Was it yesterday? The days have gone by. I think it was yesterday. You know, we understand that. Nobody forced us to become school board members. But I would like you to understand we are doing our job, in my opinion. And there's nothing wrong with someone calling any of us and saying, you know, on this situation, was something done about it? Yes. Can you tell me what? No. You know, and it's just the nature of the beast. But I understand the public's concern because they don't know that we're doing things, not so much behind the scenes, but in conformance with the laws, you know. So, you know, but your point is very, very, very well taken, and I thank you for the opportunity for me to address this. And I'll just leave it at that. Again, this is a public comment. We don't comment usually, but have I spoken well enough for anybody else, or would they like to say something? The reason I say that, this is the second time, and the first one was interesting, shall we say, the discussion that I had. So anyway, all right, so let us move on. Any other public comment? I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Tammy Gluck from Newton, and I was trying to watch the last school board meeting, but I guess there's a video issue, so I was looking through the minutes quickly today, but I kind of have some questions, and I'm hoping maybe somebody can answer them for me. I wasn't sure what the two budget figures are that we've landed on between the Budget Committee and the school board, and I wondered if the school board yet has taken any action in relation to what the Budget Committee has for a figure. And so that's kind of one topic. And then the other question is relative kind of to public relations. Over the past couple years, there's always come out, there has come out in the community a newsletter from the school board with information about the warrant articles, et cetera, that goes out to all the community members. And I'm just wondering if that's in the works, or if there's going to be any other public relations outreach from the board regarding the warrant. So those are my questions.
Quickly, I think I can address those. As of now, unless board members have recommendations for warrant articles, we are looking at no warrant articles other than the budget. Right? So that could change. As to the amount, the chairman of the Budget Committee, myself, the superintendent, and the business administrator, and another Budget Committee member met yesterday. They're meeting tomorrow night, well, now Monday night, where hopefully they will settle on their actual budget. I know we were either $40,000 or $77,000 apart based on the state giving some grant money we're not sure on. We comfortable with that statement so far?
Yeah, the difference was $77,500, and $37,500 is currently being discussed in a proposal to the Commissioner of Education this Friday. So we should know, hopefully, early next week, whether or not we'll receive the $37,500 in grant funds for the student assistance counselor at the high school. The other $40,000 included two items, which was administrative support for the business manager and the student services director, I guess, or the director, I'm sorry, the former curriculum director. He has a new title. It's very long, and I don't have it memorized yet. So that money was asked of the BudCom, and then there was $10,000 in software that was reduced at the BudCom meeting that we asked be put back until we have a chance to really finish our analyzation of the district software costs in the binding nature of year-to-year agreements and whatnot. So really, the board asked the BudCom for $40,000 for sure, and if we don't get the grant, then it would be $77,500. So I'm really hoping that we find out on Monday, so that on Monday night, the BudCom will be able to make a final decision.
We don't really have, and I apologize, this is like so awkward because this is during public comment, but at the exact same time, we don't have board comment because we.
No, you can have a board comment. I'll tell you one of the reasons I'm doing this is because the video went out last week, but the audio wasn't there. So I'm making...
Audio was out on the video last week.
Okay, so I'm making sure the people who are watching now, I'm sorry, I should have prefaced that first. We now have a tech person not here, but they come in and they check it before they come in rather than have them here. You know, the stuff that's going on that we're aware of, but last week we had video only and no audio, so I took this opportunity as a chance to get that information out. It didn't get out last week.
So hinging on your prior comment, Mr. Ambrose, Superintendent, and you said too, Chairman, we're hoping we get grant funding for the second half of the student adjustment counselor. Is that the board's message that we want to ask Ms. Mahoney to go to the board, to the budget committee with? Or do we want to make sure, like, I feel more, I don't like the idea of hoping that we get grant money. I'd much rather see us go ahead and have money and then bring that money back to the community if we get grant money.
One of the things is...
That's a real position with real importance.
And a drug person in today's society, I agree with you. It's one of the things I brought up yesterday. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Okay.
But no, that's okay. The last thing I want to bring up is on next agenda, we put a vote to recommend the budget or not, and we'll be discussing the actual budget. By then, hopefully, Budget Committee will have everything we need to be able to make that decision.
Okay.
And perhaps the chairman can address that.
At this point, Annie Collier, Newton, also chairman of the Budget Committee. I just wanted to make sure that the board and the public knows that the Budget Committee does not finalize their proposed budget until January 18th, which hopefully will give us time to get the answer on the SAC and whether or not we do need to fund it. So we may or may not take action on that. I don't know what the members will decide. However, that doesn't mean that it's final at that point. Thank you.
There is also, if we don't have an answer back at the deliberative session, if we don't have an answer for them, we can, depending on how things go, we could bring up the subject then.
No.
But I agree with you. Those 3 items to me are exceptionally important.
Yep. Thank you, sir.
So sorry that, I know it's normally public comment, but where it didn't go out last week, I think the people need to know, Okay, any other public comment? Old business? NESDEC proposal.
At this point, Michelle has reached out for, Ms. Croto has reached out for a proposal from NESDEC, and as I said earlier, it's been 2 days since our last board meeting in terms of business days for the district, so we're waiting for them to get back to us. A lot of folks are just getting back to the office yesterday after their holiday break. So that's it for that. We'll have more information at the next meeting for sure.
Okay. Any substitute update?
Yeah, I was hoping to ask the board to consider increasing our substitute pay this year, but I'd like to do a little more research and come back to you all about this in 2 more weeks, if that would be acceptable to you.
Okay. So there's 2 items for the agenda.
Yeah, those would both be on the next agenda.
And the agenda that I was going to put on as far as the budget, I guess we're going to have to wait until the Budget Committee formulates their actual budget. There is a part of the warrant article, all warrant articles recommended, and there is now a vote by the school board and the Budget Committee that is published at the end of that. So we'll have to do that before we finish business and we go to deliberative. Okay, new business, second reading of policy GCBB.
I'm looking for it. Hold on.
Okay, you want to hold off on that while Mr. Trammell, you got it?
No, actually, I'd like to get it done.
Well, no, I just wonder how long it'll take. I mean, Mr. Trammell has to give a presentation. You want to look it up while he's doing that?
See, I know solutions to this problem.
Okay, that's fine, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm actually going to need to steal it.
Yes, I know.
Oh, sorry. Or if you could find it on yours and just give it.
Well, I haven't had actually.
Oh, it is? Thank you. I think I should do it.
No, that's fine.
Is it under committees? Under school board. I'm gonna look.
Phyllis, do you want to come help? Oh,
No, Pam, it's in the school board meeting dated tonight, so go back to school board.
There's no 2018 meetings listed. I'm trying to figure
It's
it out.
27.
Go back to the
it's still
school
under
board folder.
Oh, it is, okay. Sorry.
Here,
Yeah, that's right, 137, well, it should say 1318. I think.
That's why.
I'm emailing you a link right now.
Sample.
You're in, it's not in that folder, you need to be in the regular school board.
Hey Pam, check your
Yeah.
email. I'm
Cover
sending it to
this
you.
tonight.
Oh, all right.
Push it off to
Thank
the
you.
next agenda.
I don't care.
Things change in a month or 2 weeks.
Yeah, sure, let's do that. That's fine. But I think ultimately, they're going to just have the meeting going.
Yeah, I understand that. It's just that all of a sudden something happened.
If you're okay with that, I am too.
Well, let's ask what they want to do.
Thanks.
That should be it, right?
Good. So, this policy has been modified since Mr. Trammell's job description has changed from Director of Curriculum K through 8 to Director of Curriculum K-12. And so we've stricken the K-8 right here on page 1. And further down on the last page, we've taken out Director of Curriculum under evaluation, since the evaluation is discussed elsewhere in this file, so it's not needed here. And the change was done because of Mr. Trammell's expanded job description. This is the second reading. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we turn around to see Mr. Trammell's presentation? Because I'd like to actually be able to look at it.
Do you need me to unplug
I
mine?
do need that. I just shared
Okay.
the presentation with you on your computers if you prefer.
I'm old school.
The old school? Yeah. You have a paper copy.
Paper was good enough for my great-grandfather, good enough for me.
What's the name of the file?
It was just shared in your email.
Okay, sweet.
Can everybody hear me if I speak from here?
Yeah, you're fine.
Thank you. So I have just a brief presentation, a few slides. Mr. Ambrose asked if I could. Yes.
For the camera's sake, could you please use the mic?
Sure. Check. Okay. So Mr. Ambrose had asked me to give a brief overview of assessment scores. The scores just came in last week, so I pulled together just a brief overview for you. A couple of slides to introduce and lay the groundwork a little bit, and then explain the actual scores to you. So if you notice on the first slide, this is 2016, 2017 accountability scores. So these are last year's scores. They do not reflect any assessments that have been taken yet during this school year. The term accountability scores is used intentionally. Accountability is a term that appears in federal legislation, particularly around 2002 in the No Child Left Behind legislation. So under the concept of accountability, there was a concern nationwide that there were certain states who were underserving children. In particular, children who had learning disadvantages, whether that was socioeconomic, special education identification, racial background, students of ethnicity, students with English as a second language. And so the No Child Left Behind legislation essentially said that every state must give students some sort of test that measures learning, end of the year learning, and that these assessments would use for what was then termed accountability. In other words, accountability was holding states accountable for meeting the needs of all learners. States are required based on the federal legislation. Now, the No Child Left Behind Act of 2002 has been changed, and I'm not sure if you've all heard of ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is now the new federal legislation. Many of the, or some of the mandates in No Child Left Behind have been carried forward into the new ESSA law, but there are also many new components of ESSA. But based on accountability, states are required to report achievement at specific grade levels and across a variety of subgroups. So the original legislation said assessments in grades 3 through 8 and at one time during high school, right? 3 through 8 at one time during high school. And when the assessments were given, states had to report on performance of these subgroups. And subgroups is actually quite small. If you have students in your school, and there are at least 11 of them with the same common attribute. So let's say you had 11 students of Asian ethnicity, Asian background. Those 11 students constituted a subgroup. So you had to demonstrate that that subgroup was meeting projected learning targets. So there were targets for students with low socioeconomic status, different ethnicities, identifications and special education identifications. If you have 11 or more students in a population, it is a subgroup. New Hampshire's a little unique. New Hampshire is the only state in the country that has an approved waiver to the federal legislation. What does this mean? It means that New Hampshire, in addition to using a standardized test to assess student learning and for accountability, the federal government has looked at a proposal by the New Hampshire Department of Education for which Sanborn participates and has acknowledged that that system is as rigorous or more rigorous than a system that assesses learning based on standardized tests. So New Hampshire has two standardized tests that are used to measure accountability. The first was the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. Now, for those of you that have been around for a while, when I first started in education, the test was called NEAP, and then it changed to NECAP, the New England Common Assessment Program. And NECAP was replaced by Smarter Balanced in some states and what was called the PARC test in other states. So there were two, at the time, nationally recognized assessments, Smarter Balanced and PARC. Massachusetts, for example, used PARC. New Hampshire used Smarter Balanced. The second test that we use is the Scholastic Aptitude Test, and that's new. It's only been a couple of years that the grade 11 SAT test has been the accountability test for standardized assessments in New Hampshire. In addition to those standardized tests, we also use performance assessments. Now, I would love to come back to the board at some point and give a presentation on PACE and what PACE is. But I could talk about it for a couple of hours because it's actually, even though it's homegrown, it is an incredibly complex system that has a lot of science behind it. Right? So if I tried to give you a 2-minute version, you would be left thinking that it wasn't exactly what it is. It's a pretty complex system. But these performance assessments, these common assessments that are built by teachers across the state and verified by psychometricians at Stanford University and the Center for Assessment in Dover and a number of other organizations, these common assessments are administered locally, scored locally, and those scores are verified, and there are comparison studies and inter-rater reliability studies that are done by the real sciencey folks who determine the statistical accuracy of the assessments and the scoring. PACE was approved, as I stated, it was approved by the United States Education Department. It was a period of about 6 months where folks from New Hampshire actually made the trek down with, so folks from Sanborn actually went to the U.S. Department of Education with a team of other school districts, Sauhegan, Epping, and Rochester, along with the New Hampshire Department of Education, and ironed out with the U.S. Department of Education what this model would look like. Started with 4 schools, went to 9 schools and districts, and is currently 25. This grid will explain a little bit about the charts that are coming in the next couple of slides. On the left-hand column, you see the grades. So starting in grade 3, going down to grade 11, there are specific assessments that are given in ELA, math, and science. And what is important to note is the Smarter Balanced Assessment, which is the standardized assessment, is given in grades 3 and in grades 4, grade 3 in ELA and grade 4 in math, and there's a specific reason for that. When students are on target at the end of grade 3 with their reading, at some point, at the end of grade 3, beginning of grade 4, educators look at literacy this way. Reading up until grade 3, kids are learning to read. At the end of grade 3, they need to have those skills acquired and set because beginning in grade 4, students are reading to learn. So, for example, in grade 4, 50% of the content that is taught to students comes through written text. If you don't have your reading secured by the end of grade 3, you are really in a hole. And that achievement gap continues to widen as long as that reading gap continues. So we give the Smarter Balanced assessment at the end of grade 3 because we want a benchmark to know exactly where students are at the end of grade 3 because we need to have their reading secured at that point. Conversely, grade 4 is important for mathematics because at the end of grade 4, if you don't have your basic math facts set, addition, subtraction, those sorts of things, you cannot do the things that are coming in grades 5, 6, 7, which begin to talk about algebra and those other more difficult concepts. So you have a mix, grades 3 through 11, of PACE assessments and Smarter Balanced up until grade 8. You'll see that at grade 8, students received the Smarter Balanced test in both ELA and math. And then grade 11 is the SAT. Does that chart make sense to you? Okay, so if you can make sense of that chart, the next chart is a grid, and I apologize for the darkness there, but essentially the red are the number of students, percentage of students that scored a 1 on the assessment. I want you to notice on the second column, the first column says grade, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and the measure is the assessment that they were given. So I tried to make it look as much like that first chart as you saw. The red is really bad warning. Kids got a 1. On the left column, it says the percentage of students in Sanborn that received a level 1. In the right-hand red column, it says the percentage of New Hampshire students that received a level 1. The yellow is the percentage of students on that assessment that received a level 2. Level 2 is not passing. The green column is the percentage of students in Sanborn versus New Hampshire that received a level 3. Level 3 is the target. That's where we want students at being at least at a level 3. And then in blue, you have the percentage of students, New Hampshire versus, Sanborn versus New Hampshire, who received a level 4. Level 4 is beyond proficient. It's excelling. It's the highest score you can get. The right-hand columns that are not color-coded, and here's where it's difficult for the audience, and I apologize. On the computer screen, the numbers are perfectly legible. For some reason, on the projection, they're not. The right-hand column is an addition of the column in green and the column in blue, because students that are level 3 and level 4 have met the benchmark. So if you look at that first level, grade 3, where it says 61% under Sanborn, what I tried to do there is, whichever score was higher, Sanborn or the state, I made the font larger. So you can quickly just look down the column and see whether or not Sanborn students scored higher than the state students. So grade 3, for example, Smarter Balanced assessment, you know because of the chart that precedes, that's an English language arts assessment, because in grade 3, that's what they take is Smarter Balanced ELA. 61% of Sanborn kids were proficient with a 3 or 4 versus 50% at the state. I won't read them all to you, but that's the gist of this chart. It tells you what assessments we took at which grade level and the percentage of students that fell into each category, and the right-hand column is a tally. Does that make sense? I will move on to that's ELA. This is now math. So the math looks a little different because you notice in grade 3, the students did not take the Smarter Balance, they took a PACE assessment. So the numbers in the column in red are the locally administered PACE assessments and their scores. Again, reading across to yellow in grade 3, you can see the percentage of students who received a level 2, 45 to 32, and then you see in green, percentage of students in level 3, percentage of students in level 4 in blue, and then the tally in the far columns, 60% at the state versus 53% at Sanborn. I want to draw your attention to one important piece on this. I know there's been a lot of conversation over the last few months in different meetings regarding the math coordinator position, and this is something that's come up perennially since I've been here, and a lot of comments about the fact that our math scores are not good. I wanted to draw your attention to the math scores at the elementary and middle, where they're our highest that we have, and greatly exceeding the state. And I'm mentioning that only because I didn't have the data. I always wanted to sort of talk about that math coordinator position, but didn't have the data to sort of back me up for this year. I had previous year's data, but these scores at the lower grades indicate that a number of things that we're doing at the lower grades is working. So one thing that's working is the math coordinator position. The other piece I'll mention is that our teachers in the last few years have received tens of thousands of dollars of training in something called OGAP. OGAP stands for Ongoing Assessment Program. It's a math program out of Vermont, and it teaches elementary teachers and middle school teachers how students' brains work and acquire mathematics skills, so that they can teach those skills in a logical sequence and that students can learn the sequence to math. I'm mentioning that because I just learned about 15 minutes before this meeting that there's an organization in New Hampshire that has done a lot of work with us, New Hampshire Learning Initiative, and they've just secured an $80,000 grant that will probably provide somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 worth of grant-funded ongoing math professional development for our math teachers this summer. This is the kind of work that's been going on behind the scenes to address the math concerns in the district. A lot of effort in professional development. We've done a lot of work with different organizations around the state trying to secure grant funding because, as Mr. Ambrose has mentioned many times, our professional development funds in the school district are less than we would like. So that's the math assessment scores. And for those folks out in the audience who can't read those, I think what I'll do is ask Ms. Kennedy to post the link to this online so that folks can see it on their computer screen. When you see it on the screen, you'll say, oh, I know why Mr. Turmel color-coded those. It looks perfectly clear on the screen. The next chart, which is the last chart, is a little bit of a historical, and again, I apologize for the size of this. It's a little bit of a historical look, 2015 and 2016, and each of those bands that looks like a pink band, those are just bands that separate the years. So the first white band that goes across where it says level grade 3, the first score in that column is the 2015 and 2016 score, and the second score is a 16-17. So you could see right above each year whether there was growth or regression. So that first score that is in the grade 3 column, 15-16, says SBAC. That tells you that's the Smarter Balance. It's in the ELA column, so you know it's English Language Arts. And you can see what I did in this graph is I color-coded in green whichever score was higher, Sanborn versus New Hampshire. So you can literally just look down the column and see which score is higher, the green or the non-green color. Mr. Ambrose.
I just wanted to make the point that I just want everyone to think about the fact that being new to PACE myself, I always look for evidence of validity in whether or not the numbers kind of roll out one way or another. There are times when we take PACE exams in this district where we don't do better than the state, which gives me a lot of more confidence in the validity of a PACE assessment. Because it really, the teachers that are scoring these PACE assessments, they do research on how accurate their scoring is, and our teachers are scoring, how do I say it, at a very high level of accuracy. And so their expectations when they're scoring these is the feedback's coming back to us that it's very high. What you call it, inter-rater reliability?
Yeah, so there are two studies, yeah, sure. There are 3 studies that have recently been released that looked at last year's data in PACE. The first is what's called an inter-rater reliability study, which basically means if if a teacher at Sanborn gave an assessment, say in 4th grade science, and that assessment was scored by one group of teachers, how likely is it that if I gave that same student assessment to another group of teachers in the building, how often would it result in the same exact score? In other words, are our teachers scoring in a reliable fashion, not only within the building, but also across districts? So if a student received a 4 at Sanborn, are they likely to have received a score at Sauhegan or one of the other 23? So there's been an intensive study. I can share the results with the board. I will tell you it's incredibly dense reading because it's a lot of statistics. The other study is on comparability. And comparability looks at whether or not performance at one district is consistent with performance in another district. In other words, if we mixed Sanborn kids and sent them to Sauhegan, how would they do on the Sauhegan assessment, and how would that be scored versus how would they score if they stayed here? So the last assessment that was just released, I haven't had an opportunity to really dig into it, so I'm going to hold off talking about that until I can speak about it. But what Mr. Ambrose indicated is that whenever our Sanborn teachers and their scoring habits are compared against their peers across the state, there are a couple of points that come out. The first is the differences are always measured in what are called standard deviations, right? How many standard deviations are your scores from what would be considered the consensus score? In other words, if Mr. Ambrose scored an assessment and he gave that assessment a 3, if we gave that same student work to a group of outside teachers and they scored it, would it score a 3 or would it score a 4? And how does that reflect on Mr. Ambrose's scoring habits, and how many standard deviations away from the consensus are his habits? The thing that's most interesting, and this is good news for us, because our teachers' scores on these assessments line up perfectly with their competency scores in the classroom, which line up to the standardized test scores that kids are performing at, and it underscores an incredible level of training that's happened in this district and reliability in our teachers' scores. Now, that's a great thing. I can't underscore enough. That is a great thing. It means our teachers are accurately giving students good feedback to improve their learning. When is that a bad thing? Well, it's a bad thing when other districts are not scoring as closely as we are. And I say that because our scores may be negatively impacted by other districts who are scoring more leniently than we are. Because that New Hampshire column includes all of the results from all of the PACE districts, even those districts that have a much higher standard deviation in their scoring habits. Does that make sense? So
I think that the key to this, Michael, just to keep it for the folks, it made sense.
Too complex.
It's very complex.
Okay.
And we certainly can schedule more time. I would like to have another time where we talk about PACE and bring everyone up to speed, because I've had to spend a lot of time myself learning about this, and I'm an educator, right? So I can't imagine how complicated it is for some folks in the community to understand. And so I just want to help people, because if you look at the scores on the SBAC, which are not scored by other districts, our scores are above the state average. I'm looking at ELA for 15-16 and 16-17 for grades 3, and then going down to 8th grade. If you look at 15-16, 72% of our students got a 3 or a 4, and 62% for New Hampshire, and 69% for 16-17. I just want everyone to see clearly that if you flip over to the math side, we are also outpacing the state in 8th grade by 52% to 47% in 15-16, and 53% to 43% in 16-17. Conversely, when you come down to the SAT, something happens. No denying it, no sugarcoating it, it needs to be addressed. I don't know what it is yet. Yeah, it's very complex, and frankly, I'm not going to comment on it until I have time to talk to my teachers and my students. Right? Because that would be, I wouldn't be credible until I do that. But I'm just simply saying that the idea that we are doing a very solid job in K in this district, and I want everyone to see that clearly, those smarter balanced assessments are very difficult, very rigorous. Right? The state is not signing back up for smarter balanced. They're using a different test. Maine went away from smarter balanced because it was too hard. Okay, I just want to be clear about that. To get 72% of students at grade level in reading and 69% the next year is very impressive, especially when you look back at in third grade. Oh, I can't do it that way. Oh, I need more data. See, I need more data to do this work with you, but I just want you to see that there's some really great things going on in there, and the rigor of the PACE assessments is part of what's pushing that to happen. Because our kids aren't scoring as well on the PACE assessments, so the students are getting feedback and growing and learning, and then it's coming out on the SBAC, which is actually a very challenging assessment. So I just didn't want it. That's the real message at this level of data. There's a whole other level of data where we have to really pull apart what's happening and have conversations about specific instructional plans. That's a whole other level that's going to take quite a while to go through. And that will happen with the teachers in their professional learning communities. That's where I see the next step is at this point, but I'm so excited to talk to teachers and hear what they're seeing, right? Because they're in the front line every day.
So just one other comment about, Mr. Ambrose made a note about Smarter Balance. If you've been in New Hampshire long enough, you know that one of our challenges is that we can never seem to get longitudinal data on kids year after year using the same assessment. So we thought several years ago, when Smarter Balance became the assessment, that we were going to have multiple years of Smarter Balance data so we could see whether or not our kids were growing. Now, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that we're not using Smarter Balanced anymore. The good news is that the organization called AIR that created the Smarter Balance assessment and delivered that to students through computer-based modeling is creating the new assessment called the New Hampshire Statewide Assessment, and they have told us that they're configuring the assessment from a psychometrician perspective so that the scores can be used longitudinally. In other words, there's enough consistency, we're told, in the new assessment to be able to use the Smarter Balance to show continuity. We're hoping that that is true because one of the things that cripples us is when you're changing the assessment every couple of years, you can never address what the shortcomings are in the student's learning. Okay? So I know that there's a lot of data up there. You'll probably want to look at these scores and ask a lot of questions, and as Mr. Ambrose said, I would love to come back and talk about PACE at some point to show you some of the studies that support PACE and to give you an understanding of why it was developed, how it operates, and how it links to accountability.
Chair Broderick, could I ask, would it, for the sake of time and preparation, would it be possible for the board to consider sending Michael their questions about this data, and then he could present at the next meeting? So if people could give us the questions by next Wednesday, kind of like the budget process, and then Michael could prepare to talk about them, I think that would provide it would provide an opportunity for Michael and myself to review the questions and give really accurate answers, but also it might be a lot more concise.
Wait, so what's the timeline you're thinking of?
I was thinking people could send questions by midday Wednesday, a week from now,
And have a report back when?
the following board meeting.
Is that sensible with schedules and everything for you all?
Well, the only thing, I guess it depends on how in-depth the questioning goes. For example, we can talk about SAT scores in the broad sense, but if you give me very specific questions, Mr. Stack and I will need to get into the College Board. Like if you asked me about sub-scores, so the SAT score that students get is a composite of a multiple number of sub-scores and sub-tests. So I guess the question, Mr. Mason, or my response is, it depends on how in-depth the questioning is. If it goes really fine-tooth down into the sub-scores of each of these tests, we'll need more time. If it's general questions, we can do it.
I'm gonna make a suggestion then. Have them in by Wednesday. By the Thursday before the meeting, when you and I, Michelle, sit down and come up with the agenda, we will know how in-depth. So we'll put it on the agenda with a pencil, and then when the three of us meet, we may push it another week or two based on your report to him. So we'll put it on the agenda tentatively, based on how in-depth they are, but if you need more time, you talk to him, and then when we set the agenda, we'll just push it another week or whatever you think you need.
Thank you. I want everyone to understand that I'm happy to talk about this because this is the work. We talk about budgets, we talk about the goals of the district. This is the first time that I've been able to foster, get a time where we can talk about student learning data and what are we going to do about it, because our goals should come from figuring out what we want to do, and then the budgeting should come from that in the future. Does that make sense? So I want you all to understand that the definition of student success ties back to data as one component. So we're starting that work on defining student success for the end of the year with the ISA committee. And there'll be more information about that could be shared. It's probably simultaneously or concurrently.
So tentatively, the next meeting, based on questions submitted by this coming Wednesday, a week from today.
I've got one question I'd like to ask tonight. Okay. Are we in the question section? Or?
Yeah.
Sure.
The history of our results, has, in my experience, has been that we've done pretty well through 8th grade for a while. And it kind of falls apart after that. And when you get to the SAT scores, for example, in English, this past exam period, 2016-17, we were 16.7% below the state average. It's 66% versus 55, 66 for the state, 55 for Sanborn. And in math, we're 15.9% below the state average, 44% for the state, 37% for Sanborn. Now, Mr. Ambrose has only been here since October, but Mr. Tamel, you've been here for several years. I'm just wondering, at this point, what you can tell us about what you believe is the issue here with the performance on the SATs, and what, in your mind, do you think can be done to address it?
It's a tricky question for which there's no great answer, but I think there are a number of contributing factors, Jim. So I'm glad that you mentioned SAT, because SAT has only been used for 2 years. If you had gone back to the previous year of 2014, 2015, what you would see in the English language arts scores, I believe, is that when our students took the Smarter Balanced Assessment in grade 11, we had the 7th highest score in the state for reading at the high school. Out of 86 high schools, we were the 7th highest. So there was clearly something working when we had that assessment. Math was pretty much where it is now, right around the state average. When we started with the SAT, there was a dip, no doubt, in both the math and English language arts assessments. There are a couple of components that I think I've mentioned on that are particularly concerning to us in our district. And I know that folks have taken maybe objection to one component, which is that we have a large number of students who don't see value in the SAT because they don't see themselves as going to a 4-year college. Their plan is to go to a 2-year college, or their plan is to go into the workforce, or their plan is to go into the workplace. That's the aspirations issue that we mentioned time and time again. It is shocking, if you look at the scores, the number of students who just simply take a 0 on the test. They put no effort in? Yes, sir.
I would like to see those numbers.
Okay.
I'd like this, what I want to get with this question is, I'm going to ask that we pause, because we're going to go too deep, too fast, and I want to prepare for this. Because I want to give a very accurate answer, and I think that I've been here for 6 months, and since I've been here, I have heard so many different answers that if we go down this rabbit hole tonight, we're going to spend literally all night here. So I want to prepare with Michael, and I'm not stopping the question, Jim. It's an essential question that needs to be asked, but I think so for example, one thing that's already happened since we've started the work is that they're putting in place at the high school the PSAT in their freshman year, which should be then linked to the Khan Academy, which helps teachers to provide intervention based on specific scores for reading and math. I also want to have a conversation with you all about the fact that everyone at the state level that I've talked to in Maine and New Hampshire is very concerned about the validity of the SAT for future student success. And it's the ESSA application for the state of New Hampshire. SAT is one of 10 criteria that if you meet any 2 of the criteria, you are considered to be successful as a high school student. So what they're basically saying is, if you do well on the SAT, that's one possible criteria, but if you take a vocational program and earn a certificate, and you take one college course, the SAT doesn't matter anymore for success. So I really want to package this whole thing in a bigger presentation, but when Michael says things like, you can see the number of students that took a 0 on the SAT. I don't want to do that. I want to show you how many kids took a 0. Does that make sense? Because we need to make informed decisions with the actual real live data. And I will say that I'm very, very happy to hear that the ESSA law was rewritten specifically to not look at one data point as success of schools. They gave a lot of ownership back to school districts and states to determine what success looks like because this system failed. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that the data and the information that happened in No Child Left Behind has been dubbed by professional teachers as No Teacher Left Standing, because it was so much about hard data and numbers and not the whole picture. I'm not saying these numbers aren't important. I don't ever want to see 50% of our kids doing well on something. Right? But I need to make sure that 50% of our kids, or 80 or 90%, actually did what we asked them to do. If 40% of those kids took a 0, I don't know the answer to this today. That isn't an accurate assessment. It's no, in any type of study, that would be considered to be an invalid assessment because people didn't participate. You can't judge something when people don't actively participate. So then the question is begged, well, why aren't they actively participating? So we have to work on that. So let us come back to you in a couple of weeks with the answer to your question. It's very complex.
Just one thing about that is that for years, we've heard about various reasons why standardized test scores are not accurate or not valid.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, if a certain number of students are not taking the test seriously, is that going to be different at Sanborn than it's going to be across the state?
Yes, it depends.
How do you know?
Well, for example, I think, Michael, let's say that if you really wanted to dig into this, this is the last thing I'm going to say tonight. And I'm happy to talk about this. I just want to do it, at another time with more time to prepare. If you took a cohort of students, let's say you took 100 students from one district, and 90% of them had the aspiration to go to a 4-year college. So you do a pretest before they take the SAT, and they all say, I'm going to a 4-year college. I guarantee you that their passing scores on the SAT when they come out are going to be higher than if you take a pretest for students. If you have 40% out of 100, 40 out of 100, who say that they're going to go to a 4-year college, what Michael is saying is that the kids who are going to college at Sanborn are doing fine on the SAT.
That's
okay?
That's correct.
The kids who aren't going to college are like just running down the paper and filling in the holes with zeros. I want to know that that's a true statement. I'm only reiterating what I've been told, and that's not the way I work.
Well, that brings up a point that I've made months ago, that we should report two scores. One
Right.
is kids that are college-bound, and one, the kids that aren't.
Right, so what we'll do is we'll dig into this data and try to give you the most accurate information that we can. What I want us to start doing as a community is looking at, how do I say it? Sometimes we all say things that we know are probably true. I want to go one step further and say what is actually the real data. So I'd love to know how many kids just zero out the SAT. Might be 5, might be 20. But if it's 110 kids and it's 25 or 30, we really need to look at that. And then I want to look at their names. How many of them are going to college?
Mr. Ambrose, the other comment I would like to make is, I understand the desire to maybe separate out the scores, college-bound versus non-college-bound. My goal, though, is to have every student aspire for something higher.
I agree.
Right? So I'm concerned that if we separate out the college-bound versus non-college-bound, we're setting students up who could be preparing themselves for college, because we all know that not every student gets there the same way. Right. So there may be students who graduate here thinking they're not going to a 4-year school, and 2 years later want to go to a 2-year school. I want that student to have the requisite skills to not only enter, but to be successful in college. So I don't want to, I'm leery about just separating them out, because my goal is not to separate the students who don't want to go to 4-year college. I want to inspire everyone to achieve at their highest possible level, to prepare themselves for whatever the future may bring for them. There was a statistic that's floated out there that 80% of the jobs that our future graduates, for kids that are in our first grade right now, 80% of the jobs that they will hold have not been invented yet. And if you think of that statistics, just rewind back 30 years and ask yourself how many people were employed in the cellular telephone business. None. There was no such business, right? So we're trying to prepare students for a future that hasn't yet been created. I want to inspire all kids to be prepared for that.
And I agree with Michael 100%. I just think that this is why I wanted to kind of pause this and have Michael and I have a chance to pull the data apart and come back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to make one quick comment. I prefer to, I love data points, every data point, slice and dice all that you will. Please do, because the more the merrier. I mean, I might want to go ahead and say, well, let's add data points to how many parent guardians went to college, how many parent guardians have jobs. You know, there's so many different data points that you can have quantitative and qualitative analysis for. I myself didn't go to college. Well, I didn't choose to go to college when I was ending my high school career on purpose, but I was a straight A student. I got full scholarships. I would have followed up all of these reports, and so would many of my friends who I know now who are got startups. The thing is, we should be very cognizant. Like, the more data points, the better. But the truth of the matter is, as long as they help you inform you, sir, on what instruction you need to give.
Well, I think it goes back to my initial. This is the last thing I'll say, is that students are going to have to work in small groups. They're going to have to be able to work with one another. They're going to have to be able to read and learn independently. They are going to have to be able to write, and they are going to have to be flexible and adaptable, in the sense that half of what they learn in the first 2 years of college will be outdated before they're even done their sophomore year, okay? So no matter what, to me, reading and math are important. If you can't amortize your mortgage and you can't make car payments, you're in trouble, right? So there's some very basic, fundamental, important things that we all agree on. And so I think that data gives us feedback about how we're doing with that. I just like to be very, very careful, because you might have 20 kids who didn't pass the assessment who made a 1.5 year growth. There could be an amazing teacher in their classroom. I just want to slow down a little bit, so we'll come back to you, I promise. Thank you very much. This is great. I like this stuff. This is my favorite part.
Karen.
So I've been sitting here thinking about all this. I have very strong feelings about a lot of the things related to this, but I'm going to try to keep my personal bias to the side. What I will say is, whichever way you slice it, with whatever data point you choose to use, or whatever test you choose to do, or however you decide to disaggregate the data, districts are compared to other districts within the state. So whichever way you want to look at it, and whether you think it's valid or not, and I have very strong biases about some of these things. I don't know how many people here have actually taken the Smarter Balanced Assessment. I did, because I had to give it to my students. So I said, well, I'm going to take it. The Smarter Balanced Math Assessment is as much a reading assessment as it was a math assessment. That's one of the reasons the state is throwing it out. I will also say the assessment in curriculum is an industry, and anybody who thinks that these standardized tests and curriculum developers and all these new initiatives is not a commercial industry, you haven't looked into it very much. I'm not saying it's not valid, because I don't feel that way, but it is an industry. And there's a lot of reasons why new things come out all the time, and it's not always because the previous thing wasn't valid. However, all that aside, we are still compared to every other district in the state. And when I look at this, and this is not a big news flash for me, because I'm tuned in, that's why I decided to come on to the school board. Whether you like it or not, we are always going to be compared to every other district in the state. And those percentages matter. And it doesn't matter whether we're doing PACE or SATs or anything else. I like the PACE system. I would rather have my student assessed in multiple areas than have everything put in a basket of a high-stakes test on a day that kid may not be feeling well. I don't think that's a valid assessment as a teacher. But we still are pitted against every other district in the state. And people look at us and say, do I want to move here or do I want to move someplace else? Do I want to keep my kid here or send my child to private school? So personal feelings aside, we have to really, I think as a district, it doesn't matter with good assessment, bad assessment, how people feel personally about assessments. We have to always be trying to raise the bar. And I appreciate what you said. When I look at this, I'm like, well, we're higher than New Hampshire on some of the things. Well, you know, to me, New Hampshire's not particularly impressive. If we're scoring about the 50th percentile, then you know, I'm like, I'm rethinking my life choices here because here's where I'm living and raising my kids. So we can't just aim for
mediocrity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think mediocrity should be the goal ever, even if it's slightly less mediocre than next door.
Fair enough.
I think the night of we have this on the agenda, we need to block a considerable amount of time.
I would agree with you, Peter. Thank you. We're getting done budget, so we can.
Yeah, we're going to be discussing this, but I don't want anybody not because everybody may be able to talk, but, you know, go ahead, Pam, what do you have?
So, I hadn't seen the presentation yet, and I had prepared 2 tables and a flow chart to ask you about, but I can't put it up because you've monopolized the screen, so I'll just wait till our next meeting for the... No, it'll take forever. I'll just say, let's just wait on it, but I would like to correct the record when it comes to the aspirations gap, the aspirations deficiency we may have, and that is, I went to the census website, census.gov, and it looks like for our communities, we actually have a higher bachelor's college degree rate in the population age group 25 to 64 than the state's average. So when you look at family age populations that would have children, 25 to 64, the New Hampshire statewide average is 36.88. In Newton, it's 40.59, and in Kingston, it's 37.91. So to say that, well, we basically don't have parents interested or motivating kids, I think is inaccurate. And that, again, makes me wonder why our scores are below the New Hampshire averages in so many areas. And our scores since 2009 have fallen in every grade level for 12 out of 14 assessment outcomes since 2009. They've declined. And again, our graduate...
Have data to support that? I haven't seen that.
I went into the... Yeah, sure.
You sent that to Mr. Tamel?
These are things that... Now, some of my numbers I may have typed in incorrectly, but because I noticed they don't match some of your numbers. But
well, the other piece is that those are all different assessments. So one thing that gets very tricky, as I said, is comparing numbers across years, because since 2009, there have been multiple different assessments that have been given. So it's hard to compare one score against another.
Yes.
2009, we were using the kneecap.
Well, I've got other comments, but I'll save them until our next meeting. Thank you.
Please send your questions to us, though, Pam, so we can be ready.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Gym floors is next. I think we had a pretty good report on that. Is there anything further people want to discuss or ask questions to? If not, I'll go on to the next one. I think we did very well on that report, Lori.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Jamil, thank you.
Second reading for the school calendar, 2018-19. I believe everybody has one in front of them.
Thank you.
Any comments you wish to?
No, we didn't have the audio, so we couldn't go back and check a couple of things, but I think there was a lot of feedback given, but no directive to change anything directly, so I think that, you know, there are some concerns about our half-days and when to place them and what to do, and certainly open to that conversation for the next year's calendar. But at this point, it'd be great if we could just move forward with this calendar, because the team has worked hard to get it ready.
This also has to be coordinated with the SST.
And it is not perfectly matched with the
Exeter,
SST.
and some, perhaps a little less, with Fremont, because we get the Fremont students.
We've tried to balance the two. There were 4 or 5 days that are out of sync with the SST.
And there always is.
But they wanted to have school off on Tuesdays, and it really was very disruptive for 1,500 students, you know, compared to 100.
I have a question on the graduation date.
Sure.
In the past, the graduation date has been set by the board in the March meeting or like
Right,
April after
right,
sort of
right,
the
based on the number of vacation-
snow days.
Right.
Has that policy changed? I just am curious.
No.
It says here the date for high school graduation is June 7th. Is that also?
That's always tentative.
It's always tentative.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
thanks.
for anyone that's planning on relatives
Yes.
coming into
Yes.
town.
I mean, right now, we're having probably no school tomorrow, so right away, it might change, right?
There's no school tomorrow. I already sent out the call.
Ah, okay.
I'm just saying, they won't hear it it'll be past tomorrow when they hear it, but.
So do you need a motion?
Yes.
Yes, do you need a motion on this?
Yes.
So
Okay,
move to approve next year's calendar?
okay. Karen and Jim. Any further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous? We have here February school board meeting. We can discuss this now, but it is a month away, things change. Do we want to discuss it tonight or put it on for the agenda for next week, for the next meeting? Because you're talking February 21st. We know the superintendent won't be here for sure, but I know some other people saying they may not be here, but things change. So would this be wiser to maybe put it for the next meeting? I mean, I talked to the superintendent, it didn't matter to him. What do you people feel? Should only take about 2 seconds to discuss it.
Yeah, we'll just take it.
Yeah, all right, so there's another agenda item. Student Council Representative Report.
Okay. Like Mr. Ambrose was saying, we also really haven't had anything happen since the last board meeting, but I will say that students on a student council are in full force planning winter carnival, and the senior class is planning our winter semi, which is the which is January 26th, which is a Friday at Austin House in Brentwood, which I'm hoping will be a really nice venue for us to be at, because I know lots of Sanborn students have began a really strong relationship with the Austin House, so I'd like to foster that relationship. That's it. There'll probably be more in my report next time.
Okay.
Any questions?
Nope. Thank you. I can't believe the time here. Okay, yep.
Do you have an update on the Newton Selectmen
Oh, I had that question too,
Board, joint
actually.
board meeting we had discussed? Any
Yeah,
updates on that?
as you know, there was some confusion on that, so I asked Phyllis to have them call me, because it would be better if they went right to me, because there was some confusion, a little bit of anxiety, and no one has called me,
I see.
okay? So,
So, Phyllis, you called the selectman's office and left a message?
right, to call me, and she gave my cell number and my home number, and
I called and said that we still wanted to find a date that worked for everyone. Would you give Mr. Broderick a call? And she said, absolutely, I'll call Mr. Burrell.
so,
Thank you.
I bet you'll get a call soon.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, other business? No other business. Okay, next meeting. We have a couple of things for the agenda already, fellas.
Can I bring up one item, maybe?
I'm sorry?
Can I bring up one item, maybe?
Yep.
It might be a little premature, but today, Senate Bill 193, the voucher bill passed at the State House. It's on to finance. I'm not sure if anyone else was there or watched it like I had. Many community members do and don't understand what the Senate Bill 193 means, and obviously there's two different sides to the story. So I just think we might want to keep that in our pocket discussion. What does it mean? Does it kind of increase our local property taxes? Will it be a threat to our public education locally, or something? So I think we should probably nip that one in the butt before the deliberative.
So would you like us to place that on the next agenda?
I'm bringing it up, knowing very well there's curriculum discussion. That's obviously important. Is it relative?
Could be.
And also just didn't know if the rest of the board knew that happened.
Okay, you've got a couple of things for the next meeting agenda. All right, announcements, here we go. There's quite a few here. The next Sanborn Regional School Board meeting will be held Wednesday, January 17, 2018, from 6 to 9 p.m. in the library, Sanborn Regional High School, 17 Danville Road, Kingston, New Hampshire. The next Budget Committee meeting will not be tomorrow, all right, because of the snow. However, it will be held in the library at Sanborn Regional High School, 17 Danville Road, on Monday, January 8th at 7. The Budget Committee will hold a public hearing on Thursday, January 11, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the library at Sanborn Regional High School, 17 Danville Road, Kingston, New Hampshire. For those who are interested, the filing period for positions for the Sanborn Regional School Board, the Sanborn Regional Budget Committee, and the District Moderator will be opened on Wednesday, February 24th, 2018.
No, January 24th.
I'm sorry, what did I say? Wednesday, what did I say?
You said February.
Oh, no. Well, I'm just trying to help people who are going to run that we already have on the board now. Okay, January 20, let's start this again. The filing period for positions of the Sanborn Regional School Board, the Sanborn Regional Budget Committee, and the District Moderator will be open on Wednesday, January 24th at 2018, and end on Friday, February 2, 2018 at 5 p.m. The candidate filing forms may be obtained at the SAU office, that is here upstairs, SAU office, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The school district clerk will be available on the last day to file until 5 p.m. at the SAU office on the second floor of the Sanborn Regional High School, 17 Danville Road. That's the superintendent's office, am I correct?
Yes.
I think we all know how to get there all right. The first deliberative session of the annual school district meeting will be held on Wednesday, February 7, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the auditorium at the Sanborn Regional High School. The snow date is February 8th, 2018. The second voting, okay, now that is the deliberative session where everybody goes and can make motions and what have you. The second voting session of the annual school district meeting will be held Tuesday, March 13th, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the Swayze Gym, Sanborn Seminary campus for Kingston voters, and in the Newton Town Hall for Newton voters. Is that clear enough? Clear enough, everyone, all right? Okay. So, having no more public business, we do have non-public RSA 91A:3(2)C. If there's no further public meeting, we will go into non-public.
We have to have a vote.
And can we have a vote to go into non-public? But I want to take 5 minutes before it.
Right.
What's that?
A little break now?
That's what I'm saying, but we'll take the vote now so we don't, you know. All in favor of going into non-public?
Did anyone make the motion?
I'm sorry, we need a motion, my mistake.
I move that we go into non-public session per RSA 91-A:3(2) Charlie.
Second.
Second, all right. All in favor? Larry? I think I have to post, do it. Karen? Jim?
Yes.
Corey? Tammy?
Yes.
And myself. That's unanimous by voice.